When you give up chasing, the avoidant loses the comfort of control, and that's when their nervous system finally feels the consequence of your absence. Because whether you realized it or not, your pursuit was their safety net. Your texts, your calls, your checking in, your long paragraphs trying to fix what they kept breaking. All of that was the emotional cushion beneath their detachment. They could pull away, disappear, go cold, and somewhere in the back of their mind they knew, it's okay. They'll still be there. They'll still care. They'll still come back. That quiet expectation was their comfort. It allowed them to avoid responsibility. It allowed them to stay distant without ever truly feeling the cost of that distance. And as long as you chased, as long as you tried, as long as you reached for them, they never had to face what life would actually feel like without you. When you finally stopped, not in a dramatic way, not in a watch me walk away so you learn your lesson way, but in that quiet, exhausted, soul-deep way where you say to yourself, I can't keep doing this to me. Something inside the dynamic snaps, the pattern they counted on, the pattern that made them feel safe, suddenly breaks. You don't answer right away. You don't explain what they already know. You don't run after them when they withdraw. And at first, they might brush it off. They tell themselves you're just busy, or you're doing this to get a reaction. They assume you're still emotionally there, even if you're temporarily silent, because in their mind, you've always come back, you've always softened, you've always forgiven. So they wait for that old version of you to show up again. But this time you don't. Your energy isn't in the same place anymore. You're not sitting with your phone in your hand, rewriting messages and erasing them. You're not refreshing their profile. You're not replaying conversations, wondering what you should have said differently. You're not obsessing over their silence. Instead, you've turned your focus back toward yourself, back toward your own healing, back toward the parts of you that got neglected while you were busy trying to keep the connection alive. And even though they can't see every detail of that shift, they feel it. They feel it in the delay of your replies, in the absence of your questions, in the way you no longer chase clarity. They feel it in the space where your worry used to be. That's when their nervous system starts to wake up, because for avoidant people, control is calming. Knowing they can pull back and you'll lean in calms their fear of abandonment. It lets them feel wanted without having to risk real intimacy. But when the lean in stops, when the chasing stops, the control they used to feel begins to crumble. They start to notice that the messages are fewer. The calls have stopped. The energy has shifted. And that awareness hits their body before it even hits their mind. Anxiety creeps in where certainty used to be. Questions invade the space where ego used to sit. They start to wonder, did I push too far this time? Are they really done? Have I finally lost them? And for someone who has avoided emotional discomfort their whole life, that feeling is overwhelming. They might not show it at first. On the surface, they may look unfazed, posting like nothing is wrong, acting like they're fine, laughing with friends, moving through their routine. But underneath that mask, there's a quiet storm building, because your absence is not nothing. Your absence is the reflection of everything they took for granted. They scroll back through old messages. They reread things you said. They replay moments where you showed up and they didn't. Their mind starts connecting dots they refused to look at when you were still trying. And with every memory, their chest tightens just a little more. Because now, for the first time, they're tasting what you tasted for months, maybe years, the fear of losing something real. You need to understand, when you were chasing, you were regulating their fear. Every time they pulled back and you reached out, you soothed the part of them that was terrified of being unlovable. You confirmed, you still matter, I still want you, I'm still here. So they never had to sit with the terror of actually losing someone. They got to play safe and distant, while still being emotionally fed by your devotion. But when you give up, you remove that soothing, and their nervous system, which has been trained to avoid closeness and avoid loss, suddenly has to feel both. It has to feel the impact of their choices without your love softening the edges. The first thing they feel is confusion. Why aren't they reaching out? Why didn't they respond the way they always do? Then comes irritation. So now they're acting different. Now they're cold. Now they're distant. It's easier for them to label your healing as a problem than to face their own pattern. But underneath that irritation is fear, a fear they don't like to admit, a fear that whispers, what if they're really gone this time? What if I don't get another chance? What if I pushed away the only person who ever truly cared? And that's when the panic sets in. Their body feels that loss like a threat because the emotional food they were used to, your attention, your effort, your presence, isn't there anymore. Your giving up becomes their wake-up call, not necessarily their transformation, but their alarm. It shatters the quiet belief that you'd always be an option. And that's why so many of them show back up right after you finally let go. They don't know the exact moment it happened, but they feel it. They feel the moment your energy detached, the moment your heart stopped waiting, even if you never announced it, even if you never said, I'm done. Your actions, your stillness, your absence, all say it for you. And their nervous system, wired to avoid pain yet terrified of loss, goes into overdrive trying to restore what they broke. They'll reach out, maybe awkwardly, maybe casually, maybe with a simple, hey, how have you been? But behind that simple line is an entire system shaking, their ego trying to act cool, their fear begging for reassurance, their mind trying to see if they can still access the version of you that chased. And this is where your power lies, because the point was never to make them suffer. The point was never to make them panic. The point was that you stopped suffering for a love that kept you begging. You stopped sacrificing your mental health to maintain someone else's comfort. You stepped out of the storm so your nervous system could finally rest. And in doing that, you unintentionally forced theirs to feel the weather they kept creating. And as they feel it, as they sit in the discomfort they once pushed onto you, something becomes very clear. You were never weak for chasing. You were never crazy for caring. You were the one holding the connection together. You were the one giving it life. And when you gave up, you didn't destroy anything. You simply stopped breathing for something that refused to breathe with you. Their reaction, their anxiety, their sudden awareness of your absence. That's just proof of how much power you actually had in that story. A power you only saw once you stopped using it to hold on to them and started using it to hold on to yourself. Your silence isn't a trick. It's a mirror. It reflects back the emotional distance they kept handing you until they feel what they created. And this is the part most people misunderstand because they think silence is a strategy, a punishment, a cold movement to trigger regret. But real silence, the kind that comes after you've been emotionally exhausted, is not a performance. It's a recovery. It's your nervous system finally refusing to live in a constant state of uncertainty. It's your heart deciding that love should not feel like a test you fail every week. It's just you stepping out of the cycle where you kept offering warmth to someone who kept calling it pressure. For so long, you were the one doing the emotional translation. You took their distance and turned it into hope. You took their silence and turned it into patience. You took their inconsistency and turned it into understanding. You gave meanings that protected the connection, even when the connection was starving you. You were loyal to the idea of who they could be, even when the reality of who they were kept hurting you. And that's why your silence is not cruelty. It's clarity. It's not the absence of love. It's the absence of self-abandonment. Because here's what happens in an avoidant dynamic. The avoidant learns that distance is safe, that detachment keeps them in control, that if they pull back, you will lean in. If they withdraw, you will reach out. If they go quiet, you will fill the space with effort. And you do it because you care, because you want peace, because you want to fix what feels broken. But over time, that pattern teaches them something dangerous. It teaches them that your love is guaranteed, that your presence is automatic, that your forgiveness is endless, that your fear of losing them will always be stronger than your desire to protect yourself. So when you finally go silent, not dramatic silent, not manipulative silent, but calm, steady, self-respecting silent, it hits them differently. Because now the space is not filled by your tenderness. Now the distance is not softened by your empathy. Now the silence is no longer a weapon they use on you. It becomes a reality they must live in. And that reality feels sharp because it carries consequences. It forces them to experience the emotional environment they kept creating while you were there to buffer it. Your silence becomes a mirror because it reflects back the exact loneliness they caused. It reflects back the exact uncertainty they normalized. It reflects back the exact emotional emptiness they made you swallow quietly. And they may not name it that way. They might not even consciously realize that they are tasting their own behavior. But their body feels it. Their mind starts circling it. Their ego starts panicking around it because the person who used to soften the rough edges of their avoidance is no longer available to do that job. This is why your silence can feel louder than any confrontation, because confrontation still gives them a role. They can argue, defend, blame, or accuse you of being too emotional. But silence offers no stage, no easy escape, no immediate way to control the narrative. It just sits there, clean and undeniable. And in that clean space, they finally have to feel the coldness they kept handing you. They finally have to notice the absence of the love they assumed would always stay. You see, the moment you stop explaining, you stop rescuing them from the discomfort of their own patterns. You stop being the emotional translator for someone who refuses to learn the language of intimacy. And that's why the mirror effect is so powerful, because they can't hide behind your effort anymore. They can't pretend the relationship was fine when you are no longer doing all the work to keep it feeling alive. They can't ignore the imbalance when your presence is not there to cover it up. And this is the part that requires your courage, because when the mirror hits them, they may come back with confusion disguised as care. They may test you with a casual message. They may send a small breadcrumb to see if you still respond the old way. Because if you do, the mirror goes away, the discomfort fades, the old system reboots. But if you don't, if you remain calm, if you keep your silence rooted in self-respect, the mirror stays in place. And that's when they begin to feel the weight of what they took for granted. They might call you cold. They might say you changed. They might accuse you of giving up too quickly. But what they're really reacting to is the fact that you are no longer available for emotional labor that benefits them more than it heals you. Your silence isn't a punishment. It's a boundary, and boundaries feel like rejection to people who were benefiting from your lack of them. And I want you to remember this. The point of your silence is not to provoke a return. The point of your silence is to protect your peace. Because if you are only silent to get them back, then your heart is still chained to their reaction. But if you are silent because you finally chose yourself, then whether they return or not, you have already won something bigger than any reunion. You have reclaimed your dignity. You have reclaimed your nervous system. You have reclaimed your sense of self. This is why silence becomes the turning point, not because it magically heals them, but because it interrupts the pattern that kept you stuck. It stops rewarding distance with pursuit. It stops rewarding inconsistency with reassurance. It stops rewarding emotional absence with your emotional overpresence. And when you stop rewarding it, the dynamic reveals its truth. Some avoidants will return because the mirror scares them. They feel the emptiness, and they rush back to fill it. But a return is not the same as repair. And your silence is also a test for you. It asks, will you trade your peace for familiar chaos again? Will you lower your boundaries because nostalgia is loud? Will you confuse someone's panic with someone's growth? Because a healed version of you understands this. The mirror is not meant to shame them. It's meant to wake you up. It's meant to show you that your love was never the problem. Your loyalty was never the problem. The problem was that you were giving gold to someone who only knew how to pay in coins, and your silence is the moment you stop spending your heart in a place that can't afford it. So let your silence be honest. Let it be rooted. Let it be calm. Let it be the quiet sentence your life writes that says, I no longer chase emotional uncertainty. I no longer beg for basic presence. I no longer explain my worth to someone who benefits from my doubt. And if they finally feel what they created, that's not cruelty. That's just truth catching up. Many avoidants return not because they're healed, but because they're panicking. So your boundaries must be stronger than your nostalgia. Because when you finally let go, your absence does something their ego cannot process. It shatters the illusion that they were always in control, They start to feel the vacuum your energy once filled. And instead of peace, they feel panic, not because they've suddenly grown, but because for the first time, they are forced to live without the safety net of your pursuit. For so long, your love was their emotional regulator. Your effort kept the dynamic alive. Your chasing made them feel desired without them having to open up. And your forgiveness allowed them to stay emotionally lazy. But when all of that disappears, when you no longer text, explain, or check up on them, their world tilts. They feel a kind of emptiness they can't name. It's not love at first. It's discomfort. It's ego withdrawal. It's the shock of realizing that the control they had over your emotions has vanished. And that panic is what drives them back toward you. Not clarity, not change, but fear of losing the validation they used to take for granted. They will often come back subtly, as if nothing happened, maybe with a, "Hey, how have you been?" or "I was thinking about you," because in their mind, that's enough to test if the door is still open. They're not ready to rebuild. They're ready to check if you're still emotionally available. And this is where your boundary matters more than your longing, because nostalgia will whisper that maybe this time it's real, maybe this time they've learned. But growth takes more than absence, and love without accountability always leads you back to the same pain. When avoidants panic, they don't move toward healing, they move toward relief. They reach out because silence has become unbearable, not because they've learned to communicate. They show up with charm, with softness, with subtle guilt. "I miss you. I wasn't ready before. I didn't know how to handle what we had." And those words, they sound like hope. They sound like closure. But you must listen with your healed mind, not your wounded heart, because this is not the language of change. This is the language of fear. And fear can mimic love when someone is desperate to feel in control again. You see, many avoidants are driven by a paradox. They want closeness, but they fear it. They crave love, but they can't sustain it. They push you away when they have you, and chase you when they lose you. And that's why your boundaries become your protection. Because if you open the door too soon, the cycle begins again, and you'll find yourself right back where you started, explaining your needs to someone who only hears you when they feel you slipping away. Their return after you give up is often a reflex, not a revelation. They're not coming back because they suddenly see your worth. They're coming back because they can't handle being forgotten. And the difference between those two motives is the difference between a lesson and another heartbreak. They will confuse attention for affection. They will confuse consistency for control. And unless you've built emotional distance, their presence will start to feel like healing when it's really just repetition. When they realize you're no longer chasing, their fear turns inward. They start replaying your silence in their mind. They start remembering how steady your energy felt, how unconditional your love was, how patient you were even when they made you feel invisible. And it hits them their avoidance didn't protect them from pain. It created it. Their distance didn't make them safe, it made them lonely. And that loneliness becomes unbearable when the one who once made them feel wanted no longer wants to be seen. That's when they come running. But running back doesn't mean running forward. It's usually a sprint back to the comfort of being wanted. You have to be honest with yourself here, because your heart will want to believe in redemption. Your mind will want to believe in change. But time doesn't heal someone who refuses to look in the mirror, and absence doesn't transform a person who only misses the benefits of your love. So if they come back, let your boundaries speak before your emotions. Don't rush to fill the silence they once weaponized. Don't trade your peace for their apology. Don't confuse their panic for passion, because the person who truly grows doesn't just miss you. They understand why they lost you. If you take them back without accountability, you become their reassurance, not their reason to grow. You become the proof that they can hurt you and still have you. And that's not love, that's a cycle. One that only ends when your self-respect becomes stronger than your need for closure. Because closure isn't something they give. It's something you choose the moment you stop explaining why they need to change and start deciding what you deserve. They'll sense that strength in you, and it will both attract and frighten them. They'll test you again. They'll see if you're serious this time. They'll try small provocations, subtle withdrawal, emotional distance, to see if you'll still chase like before. And every time you don't, they'll realize the old power dynamic is gone. They'll realize the control they had was temporary, that your love is not a leash, and that your absence has become the mirror they can't look away from. But here's what's powerful. When they come back, it's no longer about them, it's about you. It's about what you've learned, what you've healed, what you're no longer willing to accept. Because the test isn't whether they'll change, it's whether you'll fall for the same illusion of change. And when you don't, when you remain grounded, steady, peaceful, something shifts forever. They'll realize they can't shake you. They can't pull you back into chaos. They can't use uncertainty to keep you bound, because your silence is no longer confusion, it's clarity. Your distance is no longer fear, it's freedom. Your calm is no longer waiting, it's wisdom. So when they return, don't let nostalgia rewrite the past. Remember the nights you felt alone next to someone who was supposed to love you. Remember the confusion of mixed signals, the exhaustion of explaining yourself, the emptiness of one-sided effort. Remember that giving up wasn't quitting, it was healing. And you don't owe anyone another chance to break what you had to rebuild from scratch. Because the truth is, when you finally stop chasing, you stop being their supply. And that's when they come running back. Not because they found love, but because they lost control. And your peace will be the one thing they can't reclaim. The real shift that pulls them back is not your anger. It's your peace. Because peace tells them you can live without their validation. Peace tells them the story is over even if words were never spoken. And peace carries an energy that silence alone could never deliver. It's calm, it's centered, it's unbothered. And it's the very thing an avoidant doesn't know how to handle, because for so long they've known you through your reaction, through your emotion, through your effort. And now that you've stopped performing love to prove love, they can't find their footing anymore. They can't read your energy. They can't predict your next move. And that uncertainty terrifies them, because your peace means you no longer need them to understand you in order to be okay. For the avoidant, power existed in your response, in your willingness to fight for clarity, to over-explain what they refused to hear, to beg for attention in moments they withheld it. But when your peace settles in, all of that collapses. Your calm becomes a wall they can't climb. Your detachment becomes a silence they can't manipulate. Your lack of reaction becomes a mirror that shows them what life looks like without the emotional fuel you used to provide. And it's in that stillness that they start to panic. Not because they suddenly found empathy, but because your peace removes the control they depended on. Avoidants crave control, not because they're cruel, but because control makes them feel safe. Emotional chaos confuses them. Intimacy overwhelms them. So when they can dictate the pace of the relationship, when they can pull back and have you chase, they feel powerful, protected, and desired at the same time. But your peace, your quiet withdrawal, breaks that illusion, because it introduces a kind of stillness they can't manage, a kind of balance that doesn't revolve around them. And when you stop reacting, they have to face something they've been avoiding all along. The truth that you never needed them to be whole. You only wanted them to meet you halfway. That truth hits harder than any argument, because anger they can handle, tears they can comfort from a distance. But peace says, I've outgrown the game. Peace says, I've seen behind the mask. Peace says, I no longer need to prove my worth to you. And that kind of calm is what haunts them, because they don't know how to exist without your chaos feeding their ego. They don't know how to measure their importance without your emotional reaction reminding them that they matter. So when you choose peace, you remove their mirror. You take away the reflection they used to use to feel significant, and they start to feel invisible for the first time. It's ironic, because your peace doesn't come from hating them. It comes from healing yourself. It comes from finally understanding that your value was never tied to how much you could fix, how much you could forgive, or how much you could hold together. It comes from realizing that love is not supposed to feel like survival, that you can walk away without anger and still mean it, that you can let go without drama and still care deeply. Your peace isn't rejection, it's liberation, and they can sense that liberation even if they can't name it. It's an energy shift they feel in their bones, the weight of your attention disappearing, the vibration of your focus turning inward, and that shift shakes their core, because for the first time, they feel what you once felt, uncertainty. Your peace confuses them because it doesn't follow their emotional map. They expected you to rage, to demand closure, to cry, to post something they could interpret as longing. But you didn't. You simply vanished into calm. You reclaimed your presence and placed it where it belongs, with you. And that calm doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't explain. It simply exists, untouchable. And that's what drives them back. Not love, not clarity, but the desire to feel in control again. Because your peace makes them feel powerless. And that's a feeling they've spent their entire life trying to avoid. They start to think about you differently now. Because absence changes perspective, they remember the softness in your voice, the patience in your tone, the way you always reached out even after being hurt. And now they realize that silence doesn't mean indifference. It means you've learned to stop arguing for your worth. It means you've learned to stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. And that realization hurts them more than your words ever did, because your calm exposes the reality they never faced. You were the one who kept the connection alive, and they were the one who kept breaking it. Peace has a power that noise never will, because peace doesn't try to prove anything. It doesn't chase understanding. It doesn't seek validation. It just stands still and shines in truth, and truth always finds its way into the spaces where denial once lived. They start to see the distance not as freedom, but as loss. They start to see your silence not as pride, but as dignity. They start to see your absence not as punishment, but as consequence. And the very control they thought kept them safe now becomes their prison. Because they can't escape the reality that you've moved on without needing closure from them. Your peace is what teaches them the lesson words never could. Because when you were emotional, they could blame your reaction. They could call you dramatic. They could convince themselves they were justified in withdrawing. But your calm doesn't give them that escape. Your calm says, I understand now. And understanding is what ends the cycle, because there's no more chasing, no more confusion, no more effort poured into proving something that's already been proven 100 times. Your peace ends the dance. Your peace ends the story. And that's what draws them back, not because they've healed, but because they can't find that peace within themselves. But here's where your growth stands tall. When they do come back, your peace will protect you, because it won't be the same this time. You won't respond with excitement. You won't crumble under nostalgia. You won't mistake their confusion for clarity. You'll listen, but not lose yourself in their words. You'll see their patterns, but you won't excuse them. You'll feel compassion, but not obligation, because peace has taught you discernment. Peace has taught you that love isn't about proving your strength through suffering. It's about choosing stability over chaos, clarity over confusion, and growth over history. Your peace makes you unrecognizable to the version of you that used to beg to be seen, and that's what truly sets you free. So when they come back, as they often do, don't see it as a victory, see it as a test, because their return doesn't define your worth. Your calm does. Their apology doesn't heal you. Your peace already did. Their panic doesn't move you. Your self-respect keeps you grounded. And when they realize that, when they see that their absence no longer has power, that their silence no longer shakes you, that their presence no longer defines you, that's when they understand the real shift. It wasn't your anger that changed everything. It was your peace, because peace is the final language of healing. And once you speak it, you never go back to chaos again. The true win is never their return. It's your return to yourself. Because a healthier you will not accept a weaker love. And this is the part that changes everything. Because for so long your heart believed that if they came back, it would mean you finally mattered. It would mean the struggle was worth it. It would mean the tears had a purpose. But the truth is, their return is not the proof of your value. Your healing is. Their message is not the prize. Your peace is. And the moment your mind truly understands that, you stop living with one foot in the past and one foot in hope, and you start standing fully in your own life again. You didn't just want them back. You wanted the version of you that existed before you started shrinking. You wanted your sleep back, your laugh back, your confidence back, your ability to feel calm without checking your phone like your self-worth depended on a notification. You wanted the old softness that wasn't exhausted, the old love that wasn't constantly being tested by silence, mixed signals, and emotional distance. And somewhere along the way, you lost pieces of yourself trying to hold on to someone who only felt comfortable when you were doing the emotional work for two people. But now you're waking up, and waking up can hurt because it means admitting that you romanticize potential while ignoring reality. It means recognizing that your loyalty became self-abandonment. It means seeing that you were fighting for a love that kept asking you to tolerate less and call it growth. Returning to yourself means you stop auditioning for love. You stop proving your worth like it's a debate. You stop explaining your feelings to someone who keeps using confusion as a shield. You stop shrinking your needs to avoid being labeled too much. And you start realizing that too much was never your problem. It was the wrong audience, the wrong capacity, the wrong emotional bandwidth on the other side. Because a healthy love does not require you to become smaller to be safe. A healthy love does not punish you for having a heart. A healthy love does not vanish and call it space while you're left carrying the anxiety alone. When you return to yourself, you start protecting your nervous system. You stop confusing anxiety with chemistry. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop confusing someone's unpredictability with passion. And you start craving something you once underestimated: steady, consistent, warm, the kind of love that doesn't make you question your reality. The kind of love that doesn't make you fight for basic clarity. The kind of love that doesn't disappear when your feelings become real. And once you taste that kind of inner stability, you become allergic to anything that feels like old chaos. Because healing rewires your standards. Healing makes you notice red flags faster. Healing makes you less impressed by words and more devoted to actions. That's why the avoidance return is not the finish line. It's just an event. Because if they return and you have truly healed, you won't be moved by the return alone. You'll be moved by the repair. You'll watch consistency, not intensity. You'll look for accountability, not charm. You'll need emotional presence, not temporary panic. Because you've learned that some people return because they miss you, and some return because they miss the control they had over your emotions. And your new self, your healed self, can feel the difference. The old you might have collapsed into hope the second they showed up. The old you might have interpreted, "I miss you," as transformation. The old you might have reopened the door without asking if the foundation was repaired. But the new you understands that a return without change is just a repeat of the same wound. And you are no longer willing to pay for love with your dignity. You are no longer willing to trade peace for familiarity. You are no longer willing to become anxious to keep someone comfortable. Returning to yourself also means you reclaim your time, your focus, your identity. You stop living in emotional suspense. You stop placing your future on pause while waiting for someone to decide whether you're worth choosing fully. You stop explaining your boundary like it's a request instead of a reality. You stop negotiating your basic needs, and you start building a life that stands tall whether anyone stays or goes. Because the deepest kind of confidence is not being adored, it's being anchored. And this is what people don't tell you. Your healing will make you feel unfamiliar to yourself at first because you were so used to overgiving, to overthinking, to overfunctioning, that peace can feel like emptiness in the beginning. But it's not emptiness, it's space, space for your growth, space for your dreams, space for friendships you neglected, space for goals you postponed, space for a love that meets you at the level you now live at, not the level you once settled for. A healthier you will not accept a weaker love, because you've learned what it costs. You've lived the consequences of loving someone who was emotionally unavailable. You've felt the ache of being chosen in crumbs. You've watched yourself become smaller for the sake of keeping connection alive. And you're done with that version of love, not because you're cold, but because you're awake, because you finally understand that your heart is not a rehabilitation center for people who refuse to do their own work. Your love is not a reward for inconsistency. Your empathy is not a permission slip for neglect. So if they return, you won't chase the old story. You won't rush to recreate the old comfort. You'll stand in your new reality, and you'll ask the only questions that matter in your mind. Are you consistent now? Are you emotionally present now? Can you meet me without fear? Can you love without control? Can you respect what I require to feel safe? And if the answer isn't clear in their behavior, your healed self will not bargain. Your healed self will not beg. Your healed self will not twist into guilt just to keep the fantasy alive. Because the greatest glow up is not being missed, it's being whole. The greatest victory is not their realization, it's your clarity. The greatest revenge is not your absence, it's your peace. And when you truly return to yourself, you no longer need anyone to validate that you were worth loving. You embody it, you live it, you protect it. And that's the moment you stop hoping for a return that rescues you, because you already rescued yourself. You already built the life you deserve, and you already became the version of you that will never again accept a love that requires you to lose yourself to keep it.